Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Sound Advice, Get Year 1 in Business Right, brought to you by Sage. I'm your host, Bex Ban-Callender, and I'm back bringing you real stories from some of the UK's most brilliant entrepreneurs. Sound Advice is all about finding those practical tips that you can take away and use to grow your business. We want to be there for you, to help you through challenging times and give you a little lift when a problem seems too big to solve on your own. So don't forget, we will be posting the show notes and all sorts of other useful advice over at sage.com/podcast. And you can share your own startup advice or send us your questions via Twitter at SageUK using the Sound Advice Podcast hashtag. But enough from me, it's time to introduce this week's incredible guest. I'm absolutely over the moon. Alec Dobbie is here with us today. He is the co-founder of FanFinders, a performance marketing and consumer intelligence company. When Alec became a dad for the second time, he was bombarded with ads for all kinds of products and felt overwhelmed. So he created Your Baby Club in 2012, which curates content from top baby companies, cutting out the spam and the noise. Alec, welcome.
Hello. All good. I like it.
Thanks so much for coming. So I've just given a little preview of what prompted you to start your business, but do you mind telling us a little bit more about that journey? What were you doing before? How did you make it happen?
Yeah, for the previous sort of 15 years or so, I was a professional software guy. I worked as a contractor, working for big companies, doing short-term contracts, but writing code, writing websites when they appeared. And the idea for the business came about when, in between child number 1 and child number 2 being born, when I noticed kind of what was happening with to my wife and mine, our email accounts. We're getting an awful lot of email from an awful lot of people. We were getting sent a lot of gifts through the post, little teddy bears and samples of things and discounts and stuff. And I looked at the space with like a technical head on and thought there's like a better way than it's being done now, both from a business perspective and from a technical perspective. It seemed that it was disjointed. There was a lot of like a 1950s feel to it, like it hadn't quite caught up with the digital age. And we thought we could do a better job. So myself and one of my founders, Raf, is a creative guy. We set up to create our first website. We thought, can we do this? Will it work? Can we put something together which will attract consumers? Because if we attract consumers, we figured there'd be a business for brands behind that. So we put the first site live in probably late 2012, early 2013, and then we realised quite quickly that we were quite good at doing the website stuff because we'd done this for ages, but we were less good at all the other bits. It turns out I can't sell for toffee. So we put a few brands on there. We got a few things that were easy, like off the shelf things that were available to anyone. We did a few like Google ads to kind of drive people to the site to see if it would work, and it did. In the mainstay, it did work. Our numbers were really small. We attracted a few hundred people, but it sort of showed us that there was a business there, and we could do something with it. From then, we went on to try and fix those gaps that we'd identified in what we could do. In that we had like the creative stuff and the technical stuff covered, but we didn't have any experience really. I used to sell double glazing years ago, but bar that, in actually selling things to brands and knocking on the doors of huge FMCG companies and saying, do you want to come and work with our little side hustly startup? And so we went out and we attracted a brilliant marketeer and a brilliant sales guys who are now my co-founders to join us.
Wait. I have to stop you there. You attracted a brilliant marketeer. How did you do that? Because you were still such a brand new company. I'm sure anyone that's listening that's has started or is going to start a business wants to know how you get that kind of talent so early on.
Yeah, it's part of it is that we had like a tech stack we'd written. So we'd done a big chunk of work towards it. So we could say to these people, look, this isn't a nascent business that has nothing behind it. This is more than that. This is more involved than that. We've built some interesting things. We've got something that looks like it can do it. So for those guys, it was quite plug and play in some ways. So they could see what we were doing, and they could see quite easily how their talent would fit into this, and how they'd be able to add, how their skills would be additive. So it wasn't straightforward. There was lots of conversations. It took a long time to get them to the table, but we did. And then it was for us, it was a case of like sharing. These guys are our co-founders. We weren't, without them, looking back 7 years later, there'd be no business. We'd just have had a website with no money coming into it and no consumers coming into it, and it wouldn't be here.
And how did you find them? Because am I right in thinking you didn't actually meet these people in the early days, and you managed to kind of track them down all online? How did you manage that process?
Yeah, taking those few questions there. I mean, firstly, we met via different routes. Our sales guy I met on a car forum, actually. I was asking a question, and somebody said, actually, there's this guy who kind of knows about this stuff. So we got talking, and that's kind of how one thing led to that. And the other, I think we put an advert out saying we were looking for a co-founder for marketing, and we got a bunch of people from a huge amount applying, lots without the relevant skills. We got an interesting collection of people, but not lots who could actually do it. And Neil, our marketing co-founder, he'd done vaguely similar stuff like marketing online before, and he actually had practical skills and was looking to work in something like this. Getting onto your second question about how we met. Well, when you start a business, you don't unless you've got a huge amount of investment, you don't have lots of money. So we didn't meet. We did lots of Skype calls and lots of there wasn't the tools there are now. There wasn't the Slacks and things. So we'd use Skype calls and we'd meet and we'd talk a lot online. I think it was 2 years before the first five of us had met all together. I'd met individually most people, but not everyone had met because we were just saving money. Hotels and airfare and trains and everything were expensive when you're trying to set up a business, and the money can be better spent on other things in the business rather than on moving you around and feeding you and things.
And how tricky was it to do things like, business planning when you're all kind of in different places? Did you just get really good at meeting agendas for your Skype calls, or how did you make sure you always kept momentum going when you don't have that sort of face-to-face, bumping into each other sort of environment?
Well, it was, just to start with, it was even trickier than that because we weren't all working full-time on the business. As well as having those issues of no water cooler moments just to discuss things, there wasn't the ability for us all to talk at the same time. I was doing the coding stuff to start with, and I was doing that in the evenings and weekends around a full-time job because I had kids and a mortgage, and that doesn't go away just because you've set up a business. So we got good at scheduling our time and making sure we were using our time and not wasting things. It meant we had to be very specific with what we were doing, how we were spending money, how we were spending time, to make sure we were spending it in the correct way.
And we hear a lot in 2020 about the rise of the side hustle. And then this is a classic side hustle story. But I think what's not always clear is when does a business owner take the leap from the side hustle to the main hustle? When did you decide to quit your job? And what was there a particular moment or kind of Eureka moment that made you decide to do it then and there?
It was largely driven by numbers. The other people involved, we effectively did it in the ability for them to work 9 to 5. Like, so sales and marketing people need to work more 9 to 5 than I did as the code guy. So I think I came on full time last, because I could do it around work and it still work. And it just came down to finances because we bootstrapped. We've never raised any money. So it was when we could afford to do this and when it made sense for the business to do this. And there's questions about how, because we all paid ourselves less than we were on before. How can I survive? What's the smallest amount I can survive on? And I think it's one of those things, you read business books saying you should set up a business in your 20s when you've no commitment, and you can live on, you can rent the cheapest bedsit in the world and live on noodles. And that's all good in your early 20s. But when you're in your early 30s with kids, you can't expect them to be doing the same thing. So it just makes it a trickier thing financially. So we were driven to that thing by what we could afford to do.
And how long did it take? I mean, were you saving on the side for a long time? How much did you kind of want to have as backup income savings before you took a chance?
Yeah, I did have a small amount of savings. We were putting it in, but a couple of months effectively. So I had a couple of months runway. But that was, as a contractor previously, it wasn't a strange situation because I was used to moving from like job to job every 3 or 6 months. So it was perhaps less scary for me than it would have been somebody else who was who was more used. If you've been in permanent work for 10 years, it's probably a trickier thing for your mindset to do than if you're used to more flexible working.
And obviously you did this as your job. You're a web developer, you know about code. Do you think that it would have been possible to start this kind of business if you hadn't been so technical? Was that the cornerstone of your differentiator?
No, I think you could have done it a different way. But at the time, you'd have had to have somebody technical on board to do it. You needed to be. You'd have had to have a technical person to get to where we are. And it's for us, for FanFinders as a business now, it's a huge differentiator because we're a tech business first that does marketing rather than a marketing business that sort of use somebody else's tech to get there. Which means we can alter our course and we can be more flexible about where we're going, and we can use. Right now, we're doing exciting stuff with AI and machine learning and things that you couldn't do if you weren't there. But going back to your question, I think if you were doing it now, there's a whole load of solutions you could use that wouldn't mean there's a whole load of no-code things out there that I think you could use to at least get to the first year or something, to get like an MVP out, to get to that point that you can actually prove there's something there before you need to start properly coding it. But that wasn't a thing when we started. When we cut the first code in sort of 2012, there wasn't a quicker solution than doing that. So back then you needed a coder, but you didn't need to be the coder. You could have found somebody else. For any Luddites out there, MVP means minimum viable product. Just going to spell that out in case anyone's not techie. And I was fascinated, Alec, when you were talking before about how you brought in talent, but you didn't have the money to pay them, so you made them co-founders. Does that mean, did you make them equal partners? Was it difficult to give up equity? Yeah, I never saw. I mean, they're all equity partners with me. I don't think I never saw it as a tricky thing personally. It's much better. There's a saying, isn't there? It's much better to have a smaller portion of a big pie that's actually somewhere than all of nothing. And we would have, without those guys, we would have been all of nothing. So I have no qualms or questions about it. I think people are sometimes selfish in these things, that they think I should have this huge share of it. But you end up, that's not beneficial. And also if you've got 5 brains on something, you can come up with a better thing than one brain usually. It'd be nice to think we're all Mark Zuckerberg, but we're not. We're not all that visionary guy. We need other people looking at things and other people's inputs and thoughts. And tell me where the business is today. How big is your baby club? What are the metrics of success that you measure? We've signed up over 5 million parents between here and the US. We create different data points where we link consumers to brands they do, and we do millions of them a week. We're 28 people, split between mostly here in the UK, but we've got some in the States as well now. And we're looking further to more expansion into, the next few years. We're going to be pushing more into the US. We've made that jump over the pond, and we're pushing more there now, tricky as it is. 5 million customers and only 28 staff. That actually boggles my mind. That's just crazy. That just shows you the reach of a digital business and how lean you can be. That's incredible. Lots of what we do is virtual. So it's, we don't touch things. There's nothing physical to touch. I imagine trying to do this 20 years ago would have needed 5 or 10 times more people or something. It'd be much trickier. It wouldn't be anywhere near as doable. And I've got to ask, although I know that it can feel a bit like revealing the secret sauce, but how did you win that many customers? What were your digital marketing tactics? And how did you get them to stick around? It's about having like a thorough approach. You've got to be clear and concise. You've got to get the fundamentals right in what you're doing from like a website perspective. You've got to have clear information. You've got to have nice titles. You've got to have really good imagery. You've got to be as clear as you can be so the consumer understands what they're doing without it being too. If something's too complex, people stop doing it. But at the same time, things have an inbuilt need for some complexity. If you're selling something, you have to take people's credit card details, but you want to make that as easy as possible. And in what we're doing, we sometimes have to collect pieces of data from people, like when's your child born, so we can service those things properly. And in doing that, you've got to be as clear and upfront with the consumer as possible. And that goes through all of your marketing, from your email to the stuff that you might do, like your Facebook or Google ads, or to, things when you're doing outreach with influencers. It's about clear, concise, clear flows going from here to here to here. So you've got an advert that's going somewhere that links to the advert. So everything. So there's no break in the chain for the consumer. And it's about having, for us, working with really good brands. So it gives that everything has a feel of quality. So you're working with big, well-known brands, then the consumer thinks that's great. If you're working with less well-known ones, it's probably trickier to get that feel when you're going for a scale business like ours. We sign up. It's something like 66% of all mums in the UK. And if you're going to do that, you have to have dotted your I's and crossed your T's. You can't be flashing the pan and a bit rubbishy about what you do. Though it's easy for me to say that now, 7 years on, but we were probably, if I was to go back in time, there'd probably be things would change and would look at things in a slightly different way because you learn as you get better, and lots of it, if you look at like the design side of the site, it's kind of got cleaner over those periods. There's less big pictures. There's less. Our logo for the baby club used to be a picture of a baby. Now it's the words "Your Baby Club" because it's just easier for a consumer to see. There's less interference when somebody's doing it. It's like it's the application of science in design.
And did you do lots of different tests to see what worked? Because presumably anyone that's listening, their business is going to probably be radically different to yours. So what's the process that you follow when you tried, I don't know, you mentioned Facebook ads. Like, do you kind of run A, B, C tests?
We do. I think if you're starting from scratch doing this, there's a whole range of things you'd want to do. One of them's maybe not doing them yourself. Possibly do them, possibly get an agency to do them. If you do get an agency to do them, make sure it's not the people that did your website. Go get a specialist who does this specific thing. For us, we test lots. I mean, we run quite a lot of adverts, and we're constantly testing what works better. We found some things with images. A good image can make your ad 4 times better than a bad image. And good's it's a very nuanced term because good doesn't necessarily mean the best designed thing. People sometimes, the slightly more homemade, chintzy feel things sometimes work better than the entirely polished, Coca-Cola style advert because we're talking to people here and we're not a big brand and people don't know who we are. I mean, we might have market penetration in the UK, but we don't. But we're not Next. We're not one of those brands that's a household name. So we have to. Our advertising has to take that into account, and it would for I think anyone listening that their advertising has to be about them and where they are, not. And they shouldn't be trying to copy the big boys because it's not going to work for them.
But also you're different. So the whole point is that you're not all about the hard sell. A lot of parents are coming to you because they want to get away from that kind of glitzy ad in your face. You can only be a good parent if you buy this product. So it's kind of, you want that more homemade, this is curated for you, I'm a parent too vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to feel personal as much as possible. I mean, there's nothing more personal than your children. So we've got to feel that that we care as much as they do.
I know that I've been pushing you for advice on digital marketing, but it also sounds like you don't have to try that hard if your product is right, because you started the business because you saw this gap in the market, and then
I'm not sure I'd entirely agree. I think you do. I think that's again one of those things with you lose yourself in time. That it's easy to say now that it works, but that wasn't the case then.
Oh yeah, just to get people to know who you are in the first place. If they don't know you're there, they can't love you, right?
It's tricky to get right. You've got to test. You've got to throw a lot of stuff at the wall to get some things to stick. You're going to have to test a large amount, and sometimes it's not going to work. I think one thing you've got to when you're doing this, there's an opportunity when you're setting up a new business that it doesn't work or that advertising channel doesn't work. And I think I see people sometimes try too hard because they've invented something that they think should work, and sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes it's it's not going to work in this channel. The way you're wanting to sell it isn't going to work, but there is another way it will work. It's just testing things and working out which are the good things and which are the bad things for you.
I'd love to hear some of the mistakes that stand out in your mind that you made along the way but you learned a lot from, because often when you speak to successful entrepreneurs it can seem like the journey didn't have a single bump in the road, but there always are. Is there one mistake that stands out in your mind as that was tough at the time but we came out a more resilient business as a result?
I think one of the bigger things was for me personally was trying to work out what we should put in the product and what we shouldn't put in the product, because you want to tick every box on the list. You've got 100 things and you want all 100. When in reality, there's going to be like 3 out of there that are going to move the needle completely more than everything else. And it's how to do it. And for me, it was listening to my co-founders. And I think I found it hard as a technical person to interpret their needs into the things. So it's how do you take the ideas of the business and make them into a technical product? And how do you listen to the right people? And I don't think I was that good at listening when I started. I think I've got better at listening. It's just, I think for me, it's a skill that I needed to learn, because I used to be boxed off in a little room, tapping away on the keyboard. And I wasn't doing that anymore. We were running a business together. We needed to work out. So it's about, a lot of my journey has been about learning and listening and working with people and finding the right people. And when you've got the right people, listening to them and not treating like now we have staff, we try and treat all our staff like adults. We expect them to behave like adults, but that means you listen to them. You get the right people and you let them do their job.
How do you do that listening? Do you do sort of structured one-to-ones? Do you just have a very open door policy? How do you make sure that you get those insights?
We do both those things, actually. We'll have one-to-ones with our relevant managers. So I have people reporting to me, we have one-to-ones. And we have an open door policy where anyone can talk to anyone. I'm not a massive fan of super hierarchies. So anyone who works in FanFinders can give me a bell. We have a couple of non-execs and they help mentor some of the junior staff. And some of our junior staff are doing mentoring with outside organisations to help them too. Because I think you never stop learning. And we're on a continual journey together to try and make this thing better, and that means that we need to allow everyone to do that.
And do you have a mentor? You mentioned mentoring from outside organisations, but is that something that, I don't know, you managed to find time for?
I have a mentor. Mentors are really useful, but I don't think you have one mentor forever. I think you have mentors for periods of time, and you work with some people who give you great advice, and then you move on as you grow, because some of it's not business. Some of it's about business, but a lot of it's about people. And it's about how you for someone like me who hasn't, I'm wet behind the ears. I've never done this before. So how do I get better at this? My questions for mentors I've worked with are often people based. How do we manage this situation or that situation, rather than where do we steer the business? Because the steering of the business is done by the board, who that's effectively our founders, and we have a conversation together. We have an idea of where we're going. So we can do that together, but how you manage the personal relationships and things is where, for me, my mentorship's been fantastic.
That's so interesting, actually, because I was speaking to a different founder recently, and he's always struggled to find business mentors because he feels really confident in how he runs his business. But now he's being mentored by Kevin Keegan, the old football manager, and he loves it because it's a perspective that's completely different to his day-to-day experience. And suddenly it's like, bam, that works.
I listen to lots of, when I walk my dog, listen to lots of audiobooks, and often biographies, and it's not always the business ones that I find the best. It's listening to somebody's life, and you're listening to somebody else's story of their life. I think actually that bit there is really useful, and I can pinch a bit from this tennis player's biography about how I can apply it to my business. Is
that quite a big tip then for founders, to make sure that they read and they get as much different kind of content swimming around the grey cells as possible?
Yeah. I listen to lots of podcasts. I listen to lots of audiobooks. I read. No one knows it all, and we can all take steps to improve ourselves. And I think it's really important. It's those things that I don't think I'd done when I was younger. I exercise regularly. I try and meditate. I try and read. I try and do these things that I think are going to make me a better me, and in turn, me being a better me helps the business. We give all our staff Headspace accounts if they want them, so they can. We're trying to support people and Audible accounts, so they can all listen to books and they can all do this, because we want and buy them books. So we want everybody to try and make themselves better if they can, because I think it's the healthy mind, the healthy body.
There's a lot in the press about how running your own business has many rewards, but it can be so stressful, and there's periods of such high intensity, and it's a lot of responsibility. Even if you have co-founders like you, it's still a lot on your shoulders. Do you feel like the kind of meditation stuff helps you keep an even keel?
Yeah, I think it does. It can be a bit of a lonely road sometimes. I see myself as responsible for everyone's mortgage who works for me. And that's a chunky responsibility to have. So I think you need to do these things. For me, meditation's good, but it's the gym. Just I can go and it's just me and lifting some weights and things, and it's a simple process, but it just takes me out of the day to day and allows me to concentrate on something else that I find really good. And it's one of the things I found hardest in lockdown when it was shut, because I'm used to transporting myself somewhere, doing something, and then coming home and I do it. I'm one of those awful early morning people. And so I'm at the gym. I was at the gym 6 o'clock this morning, and it gives me structure for my day. I've done this, and everything else sort of falls into line better after it. So without it, I found it really tricky, and I think I found it mentally quite tricky.
That's absolutely great advice. You mentioned earlier that you have you've got people who've joined the club from the States, and I remember from years writing about British businesses trying to break the States, that it was always called the graveyard for British firms. How have you found going into the US? How different is it, and what have you learned?
I see why people say that. We've not found that, but we did. We were very sort of touchy-feely with what we were doing there. We tried. We put in a toe there, because I mean, you can now, like you were saying earlier, with a business that's based on the web. You don't need to be there. We didn't need to set an office up there. We could set up a website there and put some computer stuff there that we can do without touching anything. And then we can do adverts there and get people to come to our website, so we can sort of test it and see if it goes. I think that the lessons are, don't, just because in America they speak the same language as us, don't treat them as culturally the same, because it's not Americans aren't the same as Brits in how they take things. So you can't just translate things for language. You can't just spell colour to colour. You've got to be much more in depth than that. You've got to understand when you're writing. Like, we have a lot of content now. We've got I think 60 bloggers in the UK and a similar sort of number in the States, and we were trying to work out if we can just transpose one to the other, and it's not that straightforward, because what's acceptable to talk about in pregnancy here isn't acceptable in the States, and they have different. And legislation aside, there's lots of just different nuance in the detail on how that works. So I think you've got to take a holistic view of going to America. You can't just say, I'll take my English language thing here and put it there and it'll work fine, because it won't. You've got to put more effort into it there, and find some people to help you do it. Some people who are from America, and don't expect you can do it, because you can't unless you happen to have lived there or something. But
presumably, I mean, the size of the American market, that could overtake the UK business, right? I mean, what's the scale of the opportunity for you?
Well, in terms of parents would sign up, we sign up, like I say, in the UK, something like 35,000 mums a month, and it is. And when I say mums, it's 95% mums that sign up for our service, not dads, which is interesting. We've tried to target dads because I'm quite passionate about that. But in the States, it could be 4 times that. There's 4 times the populace, so it's in theory at least, it's 4 times the business opportunity. So the States will definitely be a bigger business than the UK for us. But it's the same, like I was saying earlier about us being a tech company, because we build the tech ourselves. We can build it so it helps here or in the States. So we build it in a way that's, it can be effectively used in both locations. And
would you move to other English-speaking nations? Are you looking at places like Australia, New Zealand, or is it very much the kind of two prongs of the business?
But for us as a business, Australia and New Zealand, it'll be very hard to manage. They're too far away. There's such a huge time difference between here and the other side of the world, and they're quite small in terms of populace. And when your business is based around babies, you need there to be quite a few babies born. We'd probably, if we were going anywhere, we'd probably look into Europe, France or Germany or somewhere like that. Similar sort of size population wise, and near to us for time zones. But they're not on our radar for now. It's here in the States that we're concentrating on, which is there's enough for a small business like ours. There's enough to be going up for a very long time before we need to look anywhere else. And I think that's one of those business lessons I've learned, is to say, you have to say no to lots of things. There's always lots of opportunity. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? I spoke to somebody who wants us to do it in China. Should we go to China or no? Because it's just too far away and we're small. We can't manage it. We should concentrate on cracking the things we're good at here, and cracking the things we're doing now, rather than trying to stretch ourselves too thin and trying something but not trying it quite well enough.
When I speak to founders, it's often the point when they're saying no to things because they can't manage that many different projects at once, that they usually start thinking about raising investment. Is that something you've ever considered? What does that hold any attraction to you?
A little. We never say never. We haven't to date. We might in the future, but at the moment we're quite keen on being in charge of our own ship and driving it where we want to. So we're probably not going to in the immediate future, but we don't know.
No, that's a fair answer. You don't know until you know, but it's just one of those things where you kind of wonder at what point is it always enough to fund? Is it always enough to fund growth through cash flow?
I'm not sure it always is. It depends what you're doing, and it depends how quickly you want to go at something too, and what the opportunity cost of not doing it is. For some businesses, I think it's an absolute necessity to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get the scale where you need to get to be able to do that thing. But for other businesses, I think you can spend an awful lot of time chasing money that you could be putting that time into your business. And especially when you're small, could you spend that time in a better way than courting VCs in actually doing some business? Could you be doing more sales? Could you be doing some more marketing? Could you be developing some more code at that point that makes a difference? Rather than deciding that you need to chase somebody because you need 2 million quid or someone else's money in the bank. I don't think there's one right answer, but I think in a lot of cases it can be that you're chasing the wrong thing.
And Alec, one of the things I love about you is that you have been so honest about having failed ventures in the past. Can you talk to me about failure and kind of getting things wrong and how that has contributed to making you a better entrepreneur?
I think people glaze over this stuff too often. For me, it's working out if something works, and what that means. And I think if I had my time again, I'd be very definite about what success looks like if I was starting something else. Success, and you just need to and it has to be metrics driven. Success means selling 100 things, or I want to in 6 months' time. I want to turn over £5,000 in a month, or whatever the thing is. Because otherwise you get dragged into something, and it's very hard then for you to identify whether you've been successful or not. Because once you're emotionally involved in a business, it's part of you, and you can't then. It's very hard to remove yourself and go, actually, this thing's not working, because it's you then. So what you need to do is, before you start, is say, actually, these are the things I need to achieve. Now, you don't need to be pig-headed with the numbers. You don't need to say, I said I'd do £5,000 in revenue in a month and I've done 4,800. It's clearly rubbish. You can be slippy either side of that and say, well, actually, that's nearly 5k. That's fine. We can do that. But what you can't do in that instance is turn over £1,000 and go, actually, it's working. We go, it's not, because we set out 6 months earlier what success looked like. And if it doesn't look like this, then there's nothing worse than wasting several years of your life pushed into a venture that was never going to work because you were too short-sighted to see it yourself, because you'd got involved in it and then you liked it and you always wanted to make it work. Whereas in reality, people should say, actually, it only works if it looks like this. And I think it's a tricky thing to do. Did you do that though? Were you in the position where you felt like you'd wasted a lot of time on something that didn't work? A bit, and also I think I had some slightly harebrained schemes that I'm not convinced would have ever made money. I think you can get hooked up on. We have a thing called success bias. You only see. If somebody asks you about the Silicon Valley companies, you'll go like Google and Facebook and these. You won't hear about the tens of thousands that are out there that have gone completely wrong and have hit the wall and have never succeeded. So we think that every time everyone sets up a business, it's going to be a success, when actually most of the time when we set up a business, it's going to be a failure. So, and there's nothing wrong with it failing. It's just a learning exercise. There's something wrong with failing and not knowing it's failed. That's the mistake that we shouldn't be making. That's great advice. And Alec, we touched on this earlier because we were talking about the scale of an online business and the fact that you've built in a lot of automation. But I'd like to talk about that a little bit more. So how you've kind of built in automation, process, even things like, I don't know, do you use AI and machine learning? And if so, how did you do that? How did you incorporate those into the business? I mean, we've tried to be process driven from day one, in that, when we have this process of we will speak to a big brand customer, we've got to go from seeing them to working with them, to working out quite what they want, to getting the thing onto our website, to getting consumers to look at this thing that's on our website. So we've got there is a process there. And we've kind of built it into software, so it kind of enforces that a bit. And then we build it into like our sales CRM systems that have to have a process through there. Going on we're just doing some AI and machine learning bits. What we're trying to do is we're trying to work out how both in email marketing and the stuff on the website is to show people the stuff they're interested in, because that's at the end of the day, that's what you want. If you go to a website, you want to see the things you're more likely to read. If you go to if you go to like a news website and there's thousands of pieces of news, if it can have an inkling of what you want to do and it can demonstrate then it makes sense. So say we could have, we know various bits about our consumers, so because they give us details. So we could say we have a consumer who lives in Oxford who likes red prams, who's got a baby this age. We could go, actually, there's like a cohort of people that look like this. You're much more likely to want to read this story, so let's show you this story first, and let's show you this thing from a bit of user generated content that's all about what you'd want, because we're helping you surface the right thing. And for us as a business, that can only be good, because as well as surfacing content, we can surface adverts, or we can surface things that are financially suitable for us, based around modelling what consumers look like and what they want. I think there's a question there about it looking a bit creepy. People thinking it knows too much. But if you do it well, then people shouldn't notice. Your consumers shouldn't notice too much. They're just coming to their homepage, your homepage. If you came to my site, we're just doing this at the moment, so it's not live. It should be live Q1 next year. But if you came to our website and I came to our website, we might see slightly different things, but that's fine because we're slightly different people. And the same in our email marketing software. So if I know what you're interested in, I can send an email to you that's more likely to be the things you're interested in. So you're more likely to open it, which is good for me. But it's going to have the things you like in it, which is good for you. And it also means that we're not wasting time sending people stuff they don't want. If we can see that you're unlikely to want something, then I don't need to fill your inbox with it. The average person gets, I think it's about 121 emails a day. If we can cut that down, so that we're just sending you, instead of sending you 2 a week, we're sending you 1 a week, but the 1 a week is much more relevant, then that's a good thing. And if we can use clever computer stuff to do that, then that's a good use of everyone's time.
And who's creating that tech? Are you building that, or did you find an agency? I'm just trying to get a sense of whether it's an achievable aim for a very small business or whether you have to be a lot bigger.
I think it depends on your abilities and your team's abilities. We do it internally. I don't touch the code anymore, and haven't for several years now, and I'm not sure my CTO would be particularly keen if I did. Though I did used to work for him. He was my boss in a previous life. You
hired your boss. That's cool. You have to tell us about that.
I wrote the first version of our software. Then we had an agency write the second version. Then the third version, we wanted to bring it in house, and we wanted to do this. And when you've worked as a developer for a long time, you've met an awful lot of developers. And I knew, and I had a thought about who could work with them. I thought of this guy, and so I went off and had a conversation with him. And it turns out exactly at the same time he was looking for work, and it was just one of those fantastically coincidental situations where both sides are looking for the same thing. And I hired him, and because he used to be my boss, I knew he was fabulous. He was a good boss, and he was good at his job technically. And it's like no need for interview. You know how, because when you're hiring people who are going to be senior in your organisation, you want them to be. You want them to be a really good cultural fit, and you want them to know you're going to get on with them and everyone's going to get on with them. And if you've worked for somebody before, then you've answered most of those questions already. To go back to what you were saying about who does the software, we do. We've got a team of 4 now in our tech department who are doing this. So could you do this if you're smaller? Yes, but if we were doing it ourselves, any one of those 4 people could do it. It would just be like, it's slower if there's less people. More bodies generally make it slightly faster. So I think you can. I think there's tools out there to do it. And I think as we progress in 10 years' time, if we're having this conversation, I think the sort of AI stuff will be much more easy to achieve. And I suspect there'll be sort of no-codey things around it that completely non-technical people can use to some degree or other.
And Alec, you said earlier that you have 28 staff and that you kind of went from this background of sitting in a box and just coding on your own. So I'd love to know how you became adept at recruiting, because you've mentioned that you hired your boss, which obviously you know them inside out, you've worked with them. You've mentioned that you kind of looked on a car forum and found someone that way, but what's your process when you're trying to find great people?
We've not always got it right. What we've found over the years, where we are now, is we have a slightly longer process than we used to. We have short interviews with everyone we'll advertise a role, and we'll get a load of people apply, and then we'll shortlist it down to 8 or so, and we'll have really short calls with those people, like 15-20 minute calls, with one of the senior team, myself or one of the other directors, to try and get like a cultural fit on that person. Do we feel this person can we get on with them? Do they seem like our sort of person? Nothing technical, nothing about their ability to do their role. Just do I think they'll fit in? Because you've got to. It's like a family. You've got to try and get the people that you're going to enjoy working with, because you're going to work with them you're going to spend a long time with them each week, and you want to make sure that you're all on the same page about everything. It's hard to identify cultural fit, which is why we kind of do it by feel, by people talking to them. Once we've done that, we then we arrange like a longer, more formal interview. You know, the normal stuff. Tell me what you did for the last few years. How do you think that'll apply to this? How would you do this? And then we have some testing we do after that for anyone who's successful, and we give them some tests. Now we found that some people won't do the tests. Well, if they're not willing to spend half an hour to an hour of their time while applying for a job, then they're not coming to work for us. Because they need to. If somebody's not willing to do that, then what else are they not going to be willing to do? You know, there's times where we aim to be flexible with work, but there's times where you need to just stay a little bit longer, or there's a deadline or something has occurred, and if you're not willing to spend an hour doing some tests for an interview process for a job you think you want, then you're probably not going to do those things either. So some of the process kind of weeds people out all by itself.
What's the test? Is it a personality test, or is it kind of is it like a Myers-Briggs or something?
It's sort of a mixture of a personality test and skill-based things for the role they're doing. So developers get tested on coding, sales guys on this, some of the marketing people on different things. So it's different depending on the thing. And we don't hire on the test. The test is just a way to compare people a little bit, just to get something else out of them. Sometimes it doesn't work particularly well, but it gives you just a bit. The more information you've got on somebody, the better. So we do that, and then after the test, we ask people, the people who we want to see, to come in again, and well, come in. That doesn't happen anymore. We're remote. It's a Zoom, and we ask them to prepare a small presentation on what they'd do in their first 3 months of the role, if they were left to their own devices. If we're hiring a marketing person, if we left you with the marketing for our business for the first 3 months, what would you do? How would you tackle this? And it's not something they're going to do in their job, because we're not going to put them in this actual scenario. But it gets them to think a little bit about what they're doing, and gives us an insight into their like problem solving and their structure. And it's not an exam. It's not to get it right. There's no right answer. It's just so we see a little bit more about how that person works. And they could come up with the wrong answer, and it'd still be an absolutely fine interview, and us hire them because we can see how they've gone down. It's like it's like when your maths teacher made you do the workings at school, and even if you got the answer wrong, you could still get the marks on it, because they could see how you just made one slight mistake on it. And it's exactly like that, because it's not about getting the best mark. It's about being able to think in a certain way.
And that's genius as well, because even if the person doesn't end up getting the job, that's probably quite useful insight into stuff that you could do at the business. I know that sounds terribly cynical. I'm a terribly cynical person, but win-win.
We don't micromanage, or we don't want to be on top of people. We want to hire the right people and let them go off and do their things. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean you get complete carte blanche, because the world doesn't work that way. But I'm sick of, in places I've worked, seeing people be with the boss always over their shoulder, checking every last thing, and it doesn't make anyone comfortable, and it doesn't provide a better workplace, and nothing wins in that situation. You've got to be good with how you hire, and then you've got to be good with how you treat people.
That's great. That's fabulous. Alec, you've been the most amazing guest. I really feel like all these pearls of wisdom are just going to solve so many headaches for so many people. You are fabulous. Thank you so much for your time.
You say that to everyone, Bex, but it's good. I'll take it.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you're on YouTube, please let us know you enjoyed the show by hitting the like button. We want to hear from you, so do comment below too. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe. Also, you can find the show notes and tons more useful content over at sage.com/podcast. Thanks again for all your support. Next time on Sound Advice, how do you make a success of your side hustle? Matthew Porter, who's smashing it with his glass straw business Vaso, tells all.